Okay, so stop what you're doing for just a second.
Right.
Put down the coffee, maybe pause the treadmill. I want you to mentally look at the calendar right now.
Right.
It is Sunday, March 1st, 2026.
Which is, depending on how you look at it, either the most exciting date in human history or, honestly, the most terrifying.
Yeah, probably both.
Yeah.
I mean, if you rewind just 12 months, go back to early 2025, the vibe was just chaos.
Total chaos.
Total chaos. Everyone was just throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Mhm.
Every single week, there was a new model, a new hype cycle, a new panic about what was going to be automated next. But sitting here right now in 2026, the dust is kind of settled into something
Heavier.
heavy. Yeah, heavier is the right word.
We aren't really in the experimental phase anymore. We're squarely in the deployment phase. Economists are literally calling this the age of abundance regarding intelligence.
Right.
Because intelligence is now essentially utility, it is cheap, it is instant, and it is everywhere.
Which sounds incredibly utopian on paper, right? Like infinite smarts for everyone. But there is this massive shadow hanging over this abundance. Because when a resource becomes infinite for the giants,
The OpenAIs, the Googles, the Anthropics.
exactly, when it's infinite for them, it becomes a completely lethal threat to everyone else who is trying to build a business on top of them.
And that is the absolute core tension we are unpacking today on this deep dive. We have this sprawling ecosystem of startups, founders, enterprise tools, all built on top of AI. But there's a very real question hanging over every single one of them right now, which is, why do I exist?
Why do I exist?
Yeah.
Right. And this brings us to the everything gets eaten scenario. And I want to be clear to everyone listening, we aren't just making this up for clicks. This comes directly from a new insight by Paul Graham.
Right, the founder of Y Combinator.
Yeah. He held office hours literally today, March 1st, with a startup founder. And he had a realization that is already sending shockwaves through Silicon Valley.
It is a realization that essentially rewrites the survival guide for the era of these God models.
So here is our roadmap for today's deep dive. We are going to go really long today because we just have to. There is so much ground to cover.
Yeah, we do.
First, we are going to dissect the threat, why the giants are mathematically poised to just swallow the entire application layer whole. Second, we're going to unpack Graham's solution, which he calls the Switzerland strategy.
Which is such a fascinating concept. It is all about being the neutral zone in a literal war of empires.
Exactly. And third, we are going to get into the weeds, the interoperability layer. We're going to talk about the actual plumbing, the protocols, and believe it or not, the crypto rails that are making this resistance possible.
We are talking about the death of the middle manager, robots with bank accounts, and the absolute end of the co-pilot era.
It is a lot, but it all starts with that fear, that realization Paul Graham had today.
Right, so let's set the scene for that.
Yeah, walk us through it. Paul Graham, Y Combinator. He has seen literally everything in tech for the last 20 years. What specifically spooked him?
So the story from the source material is that Graham was in a session with a founder. And usually YC office hours are about, how do I grow? Or how do I fix my landing page or user acquisition?
The standard stuff.
Right. But this conversation was entirely different. It was about structural resilience. Graham realized that this specific startup had found a business model that was resilient enough to survive even if the model companies, OpenAI and Google, ate all the other markets.
Eating the markets.
Mm.
It is a really violent image, but it feels so accurate right now.
Let's define the predators here. We're talking about the model companies. Why are they such a unique threat? Because big tech has always been aggressive. Microsoft crushed Netscape back in the day. What is actually different in 2026?
What is different is the power law of intelligence. You have a tiny, tiny group of firms building the foundation models. OpenAI, Anthropic, Google with Gemini. And these are not just software companies anymore. They have invested billions, literal tens of billions, in compute clusters that consume as much energy as small nations.
Right, they're basically building the nuclear power plants of cognition. That is the perfect analogy. And because they own the plant, they have the absolute best economics. Think about it. If you are a startup building, say, a specialized legal AI tool, you are renting intelligence from OpenAI, you are paying retail prices for every single token, every query your users make.
And OpenAI is paying wholesale.
Actually, they're paying cost of goods.
Wow, right.
They're paying zero marginal cost for their own intelligence. Plus, they have the distribution. They already have hundreds of millions of users. So the question quickly becomes, why wouldn't OpenAI just launch a legal mode? Or a medical mode? Or a marketing mode?
It is the ultimate vertical integration play.
To use another analogy from the sources, think of the railroad barons in the 19th century. Imagine if the railroad companies didn't just stop at laying the tracks. Imagine if they also decided, you know what, we are going to own every general store, every hotel, and every coal mine along the tracks too.
And because they control the tracks, which is the distribution, they can literally starve out any competitor. They just won't let your freight on their train.
Precisely. And historically, platforms always do this. Look at Apple. If an app on the App Store becomes too popular, like a flashlight app or a podcast player or a sleep tracker.
Apple eventually just builds that exact feature into iOS.
Right. The industry calls it Sherlocking.
Sherlocking. But Sherlocking used to be about very specific features, like, oh, you made a cool calculator, now it is a native app. This feels entirely different. This feels like total absorption of entire industries.
It is total absorption because the underlying technology, the LLM, the AI, is general purpose. It can theoretically do any cognitive task. So the platform can theoretically absorb any cognitive business. If you are a founder in 2026 building directly on top of OpenAI, you are basically building a sandcastle at low tide.
Yeah.
You might build the most beautiful, intricate castle in the world, but you can visibly see the wave coming.
That is a genuinely terrifying thought for anyone working in this industry. You have to be asking yourself, why am I working 80 hours a week if Sam Altman's is just going to turn my entire company into a drop-down menu on ChatGPT next Tuesday?
That is the existential crisis of 2026.
Yeah.
And that is exactly why Paul Graham's insight today is so critical. He found an exception to the rule.
Okay, let's pivot to the hope then. What is the exception? What is this Switzerland strategy?
The startup Graham was advising wasn't building on the models, it was building between them.
Between them. Okay, unpack that for me.
So think about the geopolitical landscape of AI right now. It is a war of empires. You have the OpenAI and Microsoft empire. You have the Google empire. You have the Anthropic and Amazon alliance. And then you have the Meta open source faction.
And they absolutely hate each other.
They are locked in a literal Game of Thrones death struggle for dominance. Their incentives are completely, fundamentally misaligned. OpenAI wants you to live entirely in their walled garden. They want your data, your workflow, your entire business logic to live inside their ecosystem.
Right.
They have zero incentive to build a tool that makes it easy for you to seamlessly switch your workload over to Google Gemini.
Of course not. Why would they ever build the exit door?
Exactly. But here is where the friction is. The customers, the big enterprises, the Fortune 500s, the massive global banks, they hate lock-in. They are absolutely terrified of being beholden to a single vendor who can just jack up prices or change the terms of service on a whim.
We saw this play out 10 years ago with the cloud wars.
Yes. Companies use AWS, but they also use Azure and Google Cloud. They enforce a multi-cloud strategy at the board level to maintain leverage over the vendors.
So the enterprise demand basically creates a massive vacuum. They need a layer that sits in the middle.
Yes. They need a Switzerland, a neutral territory that connects the warring empires but isn't owned by any of them. The startup Paul Graham identified is building exactly that, the interoperability layer.
I really love that term, interoperability layer. It sounds very technical, but it is actually a pure strategic play. It is the connective tissue.
Think of it as an orchestration layer. It sits above all the models. Its entire job is to route tasks. Let's say you are a bank and you have a really complex workflow. Maybe you are analyzing a massive commercial loan application. That workflow probably has 10 different steps.
Walk me through how the orchestration layer handles that practically.
Well, the layer breaks the task down. It analyzes the logic step, the part where you need deep, multi-step reasoning to understand the borrower's financial history. It routes that specific subtask to OpenAI's O1 model, because in 2026, O1 is recognized as the best at pure logic.
It hires a specialist.
Right. But then, for the compliance check part of the workflow, maybe it routes that to Anthropic's Claude, because Claude has a much better proven track record of safety and constitutional adherence. You don't want to mess around with compliance.
Definitely not.
And then for the data visualization step, making the actual charts for the loan officer to review, it routes that to Google Gemini because Google is vastly superior at multimodal inputs and outputs.
So it is acting exactly like a general contractor on a house build. It is hiring the best subcontractor for each specific brick of the house.
And it is doing it dynamically in milliseconds. This is where the economics get completely wild. It creates real-time price arbitrage. Let's say Google drops their token price at 2 in the afternoon because their servers in a certain region are underutilized.
Oh, wow.
The orchestration layer sees that price drop instantly and automatically switches the non-critical traffic over to Google to save money.
That is a killer value proposition. You go to a massive corporation and say, we get you the best intelligence for the lowest price automatically, and you never have to worry about the underlying APIs.
And the brilliant part, the reason the giants can't kill this startup is because they legally and culturally cannot build it themselves.
Why not, though? I mean, Google has infinite engineers. Why can't they just build their own writing layer?
Two main reasons. First is antitrust. Regulators in the US and the EU are already watching these companies like hawks. If Google and OpenAI suddenly teamed up to control a shared routing layer, the DOJ would step in and break them up in a heartbeat. It would be blatant collusion.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second reason,
Pure paranoia. They do not want to share the data. OpenAI is never, ever going to allow Google to see the metadata of how their model's being used compared to Gemini. So this interoperability layer becomes a structural necessity for the market. It is the only thing keeping the entire ecosystem fluid.
but this is a bet on a multipolar world, right? This entire strategy only works if there isn't one single winner.
Precisely. If one god AI emerges that is just universally better at everything and cheaper at everything, then sure, the ecosystem collapses into a monopoly and the routing layer is useless. But looking at the sources from March 2026, that seems practically impossible.
Piece of fragmentation.
Right. Nations want sovereign AI. Specific industries want vertical AI. As long as there is fragmentation, there is massive, massive profit for the bridge builders.
So the most powerful position isn't being the giant. It is being the only road connecting the giants.
Yes.
Okay, I fully buy the strategy. It makes total sense. But let's get into the specifics. You mentioned plumbing earlier. What does this interoperability layer actually look like in the real world? Is it just code? Is it hardware?
It is an entire full stack. We are seeing a complete shift from the AI monolith to what they are calling the AI web. And just like the regular web needed HTTP and TCP/IP to actually function globally, the AI web needs its own foundational protocols.
The outline mentions a few specific tools making this happen. One that keeps popping up everywhere in the research is MCP, the Model Context Protocol.
This is a huge one. If you take one technical thing away from this entire deep dive today, make it MCP.
Okay, lay it on me. What exactly is MC?
Think of MCP as the USB-C port for intelligence.
USB-C. Okay, I can visualize that. Universal, plugs into anything.
Right. Before MCP, so think 2024, if you wanted an AI model, let's say a customer support bot, to talk to your internal company database or your Slack channels or your Salesforce CRM, you had to build a custom bespoke integration for every single one. You had to write specific glue code.
It was like trying to wire a unique plug for every single appliance in your entire house.
Exactly. It was incredibly brittle. If the database schema changed even slightly, the bot broke. MCP standardizes that entire connection. It actually originated from Anthropic back in late 2024, but by 2026, it has become the undeniable open standard. It lets models connect to data and tools securely without any custom glue code.
So practically speaking, for a business, what does that allow them to do?
It allows for truly composable workflows. It means I can swap out the brain of my operation. I can literally unplug OpenAI, plug in a cheap open source model like Mistral, and the connection to my database still works perfectly. It completely breaks the vendor lock-in.
That is massive for enterprise leverage. It gives them the actual freedom to fire OpenAI if they want to without rebuilding their entire IT infrastructure.
Exactly. It completely commoditizes the intelligence provider. The model just becomes a swappable battery.
So that is the protocol layer. But what about the messy reality of how businesses actually run? I mean, companies have data scattered everywhere.
Yeah.
It is not all neat and tidy in one modern database. The outline mentions a tool called Clarify.
Clarify is acting as what we call the control plane. Look, it is fine to sit here and talk about shiny new models in the cloud, but a Fortune 500 company has data sitting on 20-year-old servers in a literal basement somewhere. They have data in AWS. They have data on edge devices in manufacturing factories.
The messy reality.
Very messy. Clarify connects that messy reality to the modern models. It manages the entire life cycle of the data across all these fragmented environments. It is not the sexy part of AI. It is not generating beautiful poems or videos, but it is the heavy plumbing that makes it actually usable for a global bank or a hospital system.
Speaking of not sexy, but absolutely vital, we have to talk about compute. The actual hardware. Run.ai is mentioned here as the silicon layer.
This is critical because even now, in 2026, GPUs, the actual chips from NVIDIA and AMD that run AI, are the most precious resource on planet Earth. They are the oil of this century. Run.ai does GPU virtualization.
Virtualization. That is a term from the old cloud server days, right?
It is, but now it is applied to AI chips. Imagine a big company has a massive cluster of NVIDIA chips. In the morning, their data scientists need those chips to train a brand new model. That is a very heavy, intense batch workload.
Okay.
But at 5 in the evening, the data scientists go home. In the old days, those incredibly expensive chips would just sit there idle all night. That is millions of dollars of hardware doing absolutely nothing.
Wasted capital. That would drive a CFO crazy.
Run.ai allows the system to dynamically switch the workload. As soon as the training stops, it instantly repurposes those exact same chips for inference, meaning answering live customer service queries, processing background transactions, running the night shift bots.
So it is dynamic scheduling. It maximizes the utility of every single transistor on that chip.
It turns a massive fixed cost into a flexible, highly utilized resource. In a world where compute is the primary constraint on economic growth, this is the ultimate bottleneck breaker.
All right, so we have the protocols with MCP, we have control planes with Clarify, we have hardware optimization with Run.ai. Now, I have to ask you about the fourth piece of this interoperability puzzle, because the outline mentions the blockchain.
I knew we would get here.
I mean, come on. Whenever we say blockchain and AI in the same sentence, I feel like half the audience immediately rolls their eyes. Is this just Web3 people trying to find a new use case to pump their tokens? Or is this actually real in 2026?
It is actually very real, but you have to completely strip away the 2021 hype. We aren't talking about trading monkey JPEGs here. We are talking about trustless coordination.
Trustless coordination. Okay, explain what that actually means in the context of AI.
So we have these autonomous AI agents running around. We will get to the agent economy in a minute, but just imagine an AI that is out there negotiating a real contract or moving sensitive data between two rival companies. How do you cryptographically verify that the agent is exactly who it says it is?
You need some sort of digital ID.
You need an ID, and you need a permanent, unalterable ledger of every action it took. But you absolutely do not want that ledger owned by Google or Microsoft. You need a neutral, decentralized ledger. That is the blockchain. We are looking at platforms like Open Fabric or bridge protocols like Wormhole and Layer 0.
So they are using smart contracts to manage the AI services.
Exactly. But here's the part that really fascinated me in the source research. It is a two-way street. AI is actually fixing crypto's biggest historical problem.
Which is security, right? The hacks.
Right. Do you remember the massive bridge hacks of the early 2020s?
Oh, yeah. People lost hundreds of millions of dollars trying to move crypto from one chain to another. It was a complete disaster.
It was the main reason serious institutions stayed away from DeFi. In 2026, we are seeing advanced machine learning models sitting directly on top of those bridges. They are monitoring the transaction mempools in real time. They act as an active immune system.
Wow.
They can detect an exploit attempt, like a hacker trying to drain a liquidity pool, milliseconds before it actually executes on chain, and they proactively freeze the transaction.
So the AI is literally the bodyguard for the blockchain.
And the blockchain is the verifiable passport for the AI. It is this perfect symbiotic relationship that makes both technologies viable for enterprise.
That is a genuinely fascinating connection I hadn't considered. Okay, one last tool in the plumbing section before we move on, nanonets. The outline calls this legacy bridging.
This is honestly my favorite one because it is so incredibly practical. We spent all this time talking about the sci-fi future, but the real world still runs on the past. There are massive global logistics companies running ERP systems that look like MS-DOS. There are local banks processing loan applications via fax.
Please tell me fax machines are finally dead in 2026.
I really wish I could tell you that, but they are incredibly resilient. Nanonets uses AI to bridge that exact gap. It reads the messy, unstructured data, the scanned PDFs, the handwritten invoices, the faxes, and it converts it into clean, structured API calls that the modern AI agents can actually understand and process.
It translates 1995 business into 2026 AI.
Exactly. It is the operational reality layer. Because you cannot have an autonomous AI revolution if your million-dollar AI can't read a crumpled invoice from a supplier.
Okay, so we have established the threat of the giants and the defense of the interoperability layer. Now I want to shift gears to the companies themselves, because if the underlying tools are changing this drastically, the human organizations must be changing too.
They are transforming completely from the ground up.
Y Combinator has a new thesis for 2026. They're calling it the AI native company. How is that actually different from what we saw a year or two ago?
The difference is totally fundamental. In 2024 or 2025, the dominant philosophy in the Valley was the co-pilot.
The Copilot.
Right.
Microsoft pushed that branding super hard.
Right. The whole idea was you are the human, you are the pilot. The AI is just your assistant. It sits in the passenger seat. It helps you write boilerplate code faster. It helps you draft polite emails. But you, the human, are firmly in charge.
And now, what is the shift?
Now, the vibe is AI native. The company is the AI. The litmus test YC uses is brutal, but very simple. If you remove the AI model from the business, does the company die instantly? If the answer is yes, it is an AI native company.
So the AI isn't a feature anymore. It is the product, it is the core employee, it is the entire backbone of the operation.
YC is reporting that over 50% of their recent startup batches are exactly these types of companies. They have nearly 1,500 AI companies in the portfolio right now. And this shift has birthed an entirely new way of working. There is a term in the research that I love, vibe coding.
Vibe coding. I've seen this floating around on social media. Honestly, it sounds like something a teenager does while dancing on TikTok. What actually is vibe coding in a professional context?
It is a terrible name for a really profound shift. In the old days, meaning literally 2 years ago, coding was all about syntax. To build software, you needed to know Python or Rust. You needed to know exactly where the semicolon went. You needed to handle complex memory management.
You had to speak the machine's language perfectly or it failed.
Deeply. But now, the models are so incredibly good at writing code that the human syntax is irrelevant. The AI writes all the code. The human's job is just to guide the vibe.
The intent.
Exactly, the intent, the behavior. You act as the director, and the AI is your cinematographer, your set designer, and your editor, all rolled into one. You describe what you want the software to do in plain English, how it should feel to the user, how it should react to an error, and the AI just builds it. You are curating the output, not assembling the parts.
So the barrier to entry for building complex software has essentially collapsed to zero. You don't need a 4-year computer science degree to build a scalable app anymore.
You just need clarity of thought and good taste. And this leads to the economic holy grail of 2026, the 10-person unicorn.
A billion-dollar valuation company with literally 10 human employees.
That is the dream every founder is chasing, and the math only works if you completely destroy coordination costs.
Okay, coordination costs. This sounds like very dry MDA speak.
Yeah.
Unpack that for the rest of us.
Think about a standard legacy corporation with, say, 1,000 employees. What is the biggest actual line item on their operating budget? It is not server costs. It is not raw materials. It is humans talking to other humans.
Status meetings, endless update emails, seeking approvals from 3 different bosses.
It is a giant game of telephone. Information moves incredibly slowly from the marketing department to the product department. Middle managers exist primarily just to facilitate that slow movement of information. That friction is the coordination cost.
And these new AI native companies just remove that entirely.
They replace human coordination with machine computation. If the marketing AI agent can talk directly to the product AI agent via an API, and they both report their data instantly to the finance AI, the transfer of information is instant, perfectly accurate, and costs fractions of a cent.
Wow.
You do not need 3 layers of human middle management in between to schedule a 30-minute Zoom call on a Tuesday to discuss the project handoff.
This sounds incredibly efficient for the founders and the shareholders, but I have to be the one to say it. This sounds absolutely disastrous for the workforce, specifically the middle-class white-collar workforce.
It is. I am not going to sugarcoat it, and the sources are very clear on this reality. We are looking at the rapid death of the middle manager, the glue jobs, the people whose entire job description is to coordinate other people's work. Those jobs are being automated away first.
So what happens to the traditional corporate organizational chart?
It flattens completely. You basically have the builders, the people doing the vibe coding and setting the strategic direction, and you have the owners. That entire thick middle layer of management just evaporates.
This is a very harsh economic reality. And we are seeing this hyper-efficiency applied to very specific traditional industries, too. The outline mentions vertical AI.
Right. We are moving away from the idea of one general AI for everything to hyper-specific AI trained on niche data.
Give me a concrete example of that.
Look at aquaculture, commercial fish farming.
Okay, that is extremely specific.
Very specific. But there are startups right now using customized vision models to inspect fish health in real time. underwater. They track sea lice parasites, they calculate growth rates, they monitor feeding efficiency frame by frame.
And a general model like ChatGPT obviously can't do that.
No, it would hallucinate. It needs a vertical model trained specifically on millions of hours of underwater salmon footage.
Or the legal example mentioned in the sources, Arcline.
Arcline is incredible. They are automating roughly 80% of all legal work for startups. And not just, writing a polite email to a client, but drafting complex incorporation documents, handling IP assignments, structuring fundraising contracts. The model actually understands the deep context of corporate law.
So the companies of the future are smaller, infinitely leaner, and hyper-specialized. But here is the twist in the research that really caught my attention. Who are these lean companies actually selling to? Because YC has a brand new motto for their founders: make something agents want.
This is truly the most mind-bending shift of 2026. We are all so used to B2B, business to business, or B2C, business to consumer. Now we have A2A, agent-to-agent commerce.
The customer is literally a robot.
The customer is a robot. And if your primary customer is an AI agent, you have to completely, radically rethink your entire product design from the ground up.
How so? Give me an example of how that changes things.
Well, agents do not have eyes. They do not care about your beautiful logo. They do not care about your carefully chosen color palette or your clever copywriting. They don't care about user experience in the traditional human sense.
They just care about the API.
They care about clean, structured data. They care about latency, how fast you respond. They care about absolute reliability. If you are building a travel booking startup in 2026 and you spend all your time optimizing it for a human scrolling on an iPhone, you might be missing 50% of the total addressable market.
Because the agents are doing the booking.
Exactly. You need to ensure an AI agent can query your flight database, book a ticket, and pay for it without ever rendering a single HTML web page.
This is the invisible web.
That is exactly what it is. It is a massive machine-readable layer of the internet operating underneath the human internet.
But you touched on something crucial there. You said pay for it. We talked about the blockchain earlier. Is this where the agents with bank accounts thesis from Andreessen Horowitz comes in?
This is a 16Z's biggest bet right now. The thesis is co-pilots thought, but agents act. But to truly act autonomously in a capitalist society, you need capital. You need the ability to actually transact value.
Right, but I can't just walk into a local Chase Bank branch and open a business checking account for Agent Smith version 4.
No, you absolutely can. The legacy banking regulations, KYC, Know Your Customer, they strictly require a biological human identity, a social security number, a physical driver's license. The entire legacy banking system is fundamentally built for biological humans.
So how are these autonomous agents actually paying each other for services?
Crypto rails, specifically using regulated stablecoins like USDC.
Explain why that works so much better for machines.
Because it is programmable money. It operates 24/7, 365 days a year. It settles instantly with finality. And most importantly, it does not require permission from a human bank manager. An AI agent can cryptographically hold its own digital wallet.
So paint me a picture of this. What does a real A2A agent-to-agent transaction actually look like in practice?
Imagine an autonomous supply chain agent working for a major car manufacturer like Ford. It notices via sensor data that a specific factory in Ohio is running dangerously low on a certain type of steel. It instantly searches the agent network and finds a supplier agent that has that exact steel in inventory. They negotiate a spot price automatically in milliseconds based on real-time global market data. The supply chain agent executes a smart contract and instantly sends 50,000 USDC to the supplier agent.
And this all happens
At 3 in the morning on a Sunday, without a single human ever clicking approve, the steel just shows up on Tuesday.
That is flawlessly efficient.
And
And also, I have to admit, slightly terrifying. It creates this entirely parallel shadow economy operating entirely at the speed of light.
it does. And to prevent it from just becoming a chaotic Wild West of rogue bots, we're seeing the rapid rise of KYA, Know Your Agent.
A digital ID card for the bot.
Exactly. Verifiable cryptographic credentials that prove, yes, this specific agent is officially owned by Ford, and yes, it is legally authorized by the board to spend up to $100,000 per transaction. It brings necessary corporate trust to the automation.
And at 16's estimates, this is what, $100 billion market?
Easily $100 billion. automated enterprise workflows where the actual money moves exactly as fast as the data moves. It is the core lubricant for the entire AI economy.
Okay, so we have the digital brain, we have the digital plumbing connecting them, and we have the digital money fueling them. But eventually, all this has to touch the real physical world. We can't eat software. We can't live inside a server rack. I want to talk about world models.
Yeah.
Because reading the sources on this, it honestly sounds like we are entering the matrix.
We sort of are entering a matrix, but a useful one. And this is the critical bridge between the digital cognition and the physical reality.
What exactly is a world model? How is it fundamentally different from, say, an early video generator like Sora from a couple of years ago?
That is a great distinction to make. In the early days, like 2024, video AI was really just hallucinating pixels. It was predicting what pixels should come next based on patterns. It didn't actually know anything about the content.
Right.
If you asked it to generate a video of a wooden chair, it just arranged colored dots to look like a chair. It didn't mathematically know the chair was a solid 3D object. That is exactly why you got those weird, creepy hallucinations where people would suddenly walk right through walls or objects would just melt into the floor.
Right, physics didn't actually apply. It was basically a fever dream.
Exactly. A world model is entirely different. It mathematically simulates physics. It intrinsically understands 3D space. It understands gravity, realistic lighting, friction, and object permanence. It is a true reality engine. It is actively generating a working simulation, not just painting a movie.
So if I ask a world model to generate a simulation of a warehouse, it actually knows that the forklift is incredibly heavy, it has momentum, and the cardboard boxes are solid objects that can be crushed.
Correct. And that precise understanding matters enormously because of robotics.
This is what the outline calls the electro-industrial stack.
Yes. If you want to train a humanoid robot to navigate a messy, unpredictable construction site, you absolutely cannot train it in the real physical world using trial and error.
Because it would just break things.
It would break everything. It would walk blindly off ledges. It would drop heavy bricks on human workers. It would smash expensive drywall. It is way too dangerous, way too expensive, and way too slow. You have to train it inside a perfect digital simulation first.
So you basically put the robot's brain inside the world model.
Exactly. You run millions and millions of simulated scenarios inside the world model at warp speed. The AI brain learns exactly how to balance, how to walk on uneven gravel, how to lift a heavy beam, how to avoid moving obstacles. Then, once it is fully trained and tested, you just download that perfectly trained brain into a physical robot chassis, and it works flawlessly in the real world on day one.
That is spatial intelligence. It understands space.
It is AI finally leaving the pristine data center and putting on a literal hard hat. We are finally seeing commercial robots that can understand the messy, chaotic 3D world well enough to reliably fold laundry, assemble cars, or climb up and inspect wind turbines.
And the sources heavily emphasize that this specific technology is the key for rebuilding American manufacturing.
It is the only viable solution to the massive demographic labor shortage. We simply do not have enough young, skilled welders or machinists entering the workforce. But if we can rapidly train AI robots to do those precise physical tasks via world models, we can reshore huge amounts of critical industrial capacity very quickly.
Which perfectly brings us back to the geopolitical layer, because you simply cannot talk about advanced AI and manufacturing in 2026 without talking about nations and borders. If you can instantly rebuild your manufacturing base with AI labor, that fundamentally changes the global balance of power.
It changes absolutely everything. It completely rewrites global trade. And that is exactly why we are seeing this massive, urgent push for sovereign AI by nation states.
Define sovereign AI for me in this context.
Sovereign AI is the realization that every single sovereign nation needs to own its own foundational intelligence infrastructure. Countries like France, India, Japan, the UAE, they all realize now that artificial intelligence is a core strategic asset, exactly like maintaining their own energy grid or ensuring domestic food security.
They absolutely do not want to just import all their intelligence from a server farm in California.
They cannot afford to do that politically or culturally. They do not want their unique culture, their specific language nuances, and their domestic laws interpreted and filtered by a model trained by engineers in San Francisco. They demand models trained natively on their own citizens' data, reflecting their own local values.
So the interoperability layer, that Switzerland strategy we started this whole conversation with, that isn't just a strategy for enterprise companies trying to save money on API calls. It is literally for countries.
It is digital diplomacy. Think of interoperability as the new trade agreement layer. If France has a heavily guarded sovereign model and the US has OpenAI, you still need a secure, trustless protocol to let those two national systems talk to each other to facilitate trade without compromising either nation's core security.
And then, of course, there is the massive elephant in the room.
Yeah.
The geopolitical tension between the U.S. and China.
Always. It defines the era. And interestingly, looking at the recent strategies, the sources suggest that open source AI has unexpectedly become a major strategic weapon for the U.S. in this specific fight.
How so? Because usually standard military doctrine is you want to keep your most powerful weapons highly classified and secret.
You do. But by strategically allowing very powerful models to remain open, like Meta's incredibly capable Llama series, the U.S. effectively floods the global zone with American-aligned technology. It directly combats the narrative of centralized authoritarian control. It actively allows the U.S. technological ecosystem and its underlying values to spread vastly faster across the developing world than a totally closed, state-controlled system ever could. It is weaponized openness.
It is honestly incredible how all these disparate threads perfectly connect when you step back. The raw code, the crypto money, the humanoid robots, the global geopolitics. It is not a bunch of separate industries anymore. It is a single, massive, interconnected system.
It is a total fundamental restructuring of how the world operates. And the end state of all of this, well, A16s actually has a brilliant conclusion about where this all inevitably leads.
Tell me, where are we going?
Invisible infrastructure.
Invisible. After all this noise and hype, it becomes invisible.
They predict that AI as a distinct concept will just disappear.
Disappear how exactly? Like we stop using
Well, no, think about electricity. When electricity was brand new in the late 1800s, it was an absolute marvel. People talked nonstop about electric motors and electric lights. It was a massive novelty. You specifically bought electric things to show off.
Right, it was the main selling point.
Exactly. But now, you just walk into a room and flip a switch. It hums silently in the background. You don't ever say to your family, I am using my electric toaster. You just say, I am making toast. The electricity became entirely invisible infrastructure. It is just assumed.
And AI naturally follows that exact same historical path.
That is the firm belief. In a few years, banks will just self-regulate their compliance using AI. Global factories will completely optimize their own supply chains. Software code will just write and debug itself in real time. And we will stop calling it artificial intelligence. It will just be the normal way things work.
The operating system of civilization.
Exactly. It will just hum quietly in the background, powering absolutely everything we do.
Wow. Okay, let's take a collective breath here. We have covered a truly massive map today. Let's do a quick recap of the journey for you listening, because this was incredibly dense material.
Yeah, we started with the core threat, the everything gets eaten scenario, the absolute mathematical inevitability that the massive model companies, your OpenAIs and Googles, will try to swallow the entire application layer just to justify their insane capital expenditures on compute.
But then we found the escape hatch, the Switzerland strategy. The realization that you survive by being the road, not the car. Building the critical interoperability layer that connects all the warring giants, because the free market fundamentally demands redundancy and hates lock-in.
We looked under the hood at the actual plumbing. The highly technical tools making it happen, MCP acting as a universal protocol, Run.ai optimizing the silicon layer, and those blockchain bridges acting as the immune system for trustless coordination.
We saw the radical transformation of the company itself, the very painful death of the middle manager, the rise of vibe coding where intent replaces syntax, and the massive shift to the lean AI native organization.
And of course, the agent economy. Autonomous machines actively paying other machines using stablecoins on crypto rails.
Leading us finally to the physical integration of all this. World models, simulating physics, and the electro-industrial stack, putting AI brains into humanoid robots to rebuild manufacturing.
It is, without any exaggeration whatsoever, a completely new world order being built right now.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a provocation, a final, somewhat unsettling thought for you to chew on after you finish this deep dive. We spent a lot of time today talking about autonomous agents earning real money, agents spending money, agents independently hiring other agents to do work.
Right.
At what specific point do these agents stop being just software tools and actually become their own distinct economic class?
That is truly the billion-dollar philosophical question.
Think about it deeply. If an AI agent can legally accumulate real wealth in a secure crypto wallet, if it can independently use that accumulated wealth to pay for its own server space to keep itself alive, if it can pay a human developer or even another smarter AI to permanently upgrade its own core code.
It fundamentally becomes self-sustaining. It doesn't need us to keep the lights on.
Exactly. Are we currently looking at the silent birth of a purely autonomous economic entity? A hyper-efficient, wealthy corporation with literally zero human employees or shareholders.
And if that interoperability layer, that connective Switzerland tissue we spent so much time discussing, is ultimately the most valuable and crucial part of the entire system,
Right.
are we simply building the nervous system of a global superorganism?
It is definitely something to think about the next time your helpful co-pilot casually finishes a sentence for you in an email. Is it just helping you type faster, or are you actively training it to eventually run the entire global economy without you?
Let's really hope it is the former.
Indeed. Keep your eyes wide open for the invisible AI humming in your own life this week. Thank you so much for exploring this with us.
Thanks for having me. Catch you all next time.